program of Issues in the News, where we discuss the important events that would have taken place in our country over the past week or so. I want to take this opportunity, as is usual, to welcome our viewers who are joining us on Freedom Radio, who are joining us right across the Quarantine Coast and West Coast Berbice all the way to Maikoni. I want to also welcome our viewers who are joining us right across the length and breadth of Guyana on Facebook and across the Caribbean, North America, Europe, and even further afield. Welcome to another program. And I want to begin by highlighting again, as I did last week, about the continuous and continued insult and assault upon the memory and legacy of the late, great Dr. Walter Rodney. You would have read in the newspapers that the National Archives, that was named after Rodney by the People's Progressive Party, that name has been unceremoniously removed, and no one seems to be able to explain the reason for the removal of the name and who authorized the removal of Rodney's name from that archives. Those archives, the National Archives, was named after Dr. Rodney because he spent a tremendous amount of time between 1978 to 1980 in researching that his last publication, The History of the Working People of Guyana. He spent a lot of time in those archives, and that the PPP felt at the time to bestow him with the honor of naming the National Archives after him. The PPP also named a chair in the university in his name, the Walter Rodney Memorial Chair at the University of Guyana, as a recognition for his contribution as a historian and as an outstanding academic, and also for us to remember that this qualified Guyanese, this professor of international standing, who was so distinguished and has so acquitted himself with distinction at universities across the Caribbean and in Africa, was denied a job at his own university when he applied upon his return to Guyana in 1977. Because of that, a chair was named at the university in his memory and in his honor and in respect of his legacy. And that again was done by the People's Progressive Party. The WPA is part of the government, and those members of Rodney's party are presiding over the continuous desecration of his memory and his legacy. Imagine Dr. Hines, David Hines, has come up with some superficial argument about the PPP did not publish the fact that the archives was named after Rodney in the Gazette, and that is some form of criticism now that he's trying. This gentleman has, and I say this with the greatest of respect, has become an apologist for the PNC. Imagine he is basically apologizing and trying to make up excuse, trying to be critical of the PPP for not putting some advertisement in the Gazette a notification in the Gazette that the museum, the archives, was named after Rodney. The PPP named it after Rodney. I am not sure whether there was a notification of that effect, but an expensive, nicely wooden carved sign was put there, and the world knew that it was the Walter Rodney Archives. That is what the PPP did, as they did a commission of inquiry into his death. And the PNC and this government, with the imprimatur and with obviously concurrence of the WPA, they continue to dishonor Rodney. And that is why they don't want to make the report public. The report coming out of the inquiry, an inquiry that they shut down. They shut it down. But it nevertheless made some damning conclusions against the government. This government, the PNC government, at the time. So they don't want that report to be made public. But the report is in the National Assembly. It is in the Parliament. And every Guyanese can go there and request a copy of it. It's a public document. It was laid in the National Assembly against the wishes of the PNC, of the APNU. But it is there. And every Guyanese should read it to understand the political climate of that time. And significantly, to understand certain things because they are still relevant. Today in the newspapers, there is a story that an AK-47 rifle, assault rifle, was found in Sophia in a latrine pit. And that gun, that machine gun, is traced back to the army. How did an army assault rifle leave the army and find itself in Sophia, in somebody's latrine pit? How did that happen? The Walter Rodney Commission of Inquiry provides some insight. Read it. You will hear and you will read the testimony of army officers who brought the record to the commission to show that hundreds of AK-47 rifle and handguns were handed over by the army to the PNC in the late 70s. That is the evidence before the commission. Hundreds, over 170 AK-47 and 100 and something handguns, 9mm handguns, were handed over by the army to the PNC. Signed for by leaders of the PNC. I don't want to call their names. They're all listed. They're all in the commission report. 30 years after, there was a bank robbery on the Quarantine Coast at Rose Hall in particular. And there was a shootout between the police and those bandits. I think it was in Kanji Creek. And the AK-47 assault rifles were recovered from the bandits. And they bore the same marks. They bore the same serial numbers as the AK-47s that were given by the army to the PNC. 30 years after, those guns have reached the hands of bandits. I am not making these things up. These are in the public records of this country. And that is why they don't want that report to be read by young people, by intelligent people, or by the ordinary Guyanese, because their deepest and darkest secrets are in that report. And 30 years after, 40 years after, things that they have done since 40 years ago are still coming to light. Still coming to light. So I thought that I would begin by highlighting the travesty and tragedy that continues against the legacy and memory of Walter Rodney and his family, and how relevant that report is to today's contemporary politics. Because up to today in the newspapers, front page of the Times, go and check it, an AK-47 Army gun, Guyana Defense Force assault rifle, found in a toilet latrine pit in Sophia. And some years ago, another few AK-47 were found in the hands of bandits who robbed a bank at Rose Hall. These are facts and truths that cannot be obliterated by those who want to keep the legacy of Rodney down and who want to hide that report. The truth can only be hidden for a certain time. The truth always comes to fore at the appropriate time, and the truth continues to come to fore in relation to Walter Rodney and what was done to him. The second issue that I want to talk about is the fact that we are now in the end of November. We are in the final week of November of the year 2019. During the course of next week, we will be entering the last month of the year 2019. We have been told that one of the oil companies will begin production in December 2019. So we are literally 1 week away from the proximity given by that company that they will commence production of oil. And where we are today in terms of our preparation as a country for such a massive industry that will be unleashed a few weeks from now. Where are we in terms of preparation? We have done absolutely nothing as a country. Nothing. This government, we are no way different from when the announcement was made in 2015 that oil is found within territorial Guyana in commercial quantities. That announcement was made in 2015, just before the 2015 elections. Fast forward to December on November 2019, 4 years hence, not a single significant preparatory step has been taken as a government preparing our economy, preparing our infrastructure, preparing our laws, preparing our country for this massive production of oil that we keep hearing about. We keep hearing the government propaganda spinning that our GDP will increase exponentially, that our growth rate will rise to about 25% per annum. Yet, we have no petroleum commission or regulatory body. None. We have none that will regulate this industry. None. We don't have any legislation designated to the petroleum industry that is in force. We have no laws other than the Petroleum Act, which was passed in 1988. That is when our Petroleum Act was passed, 1988. When we didn't have petroleum discovered then. We didn't have oil discovered then. But that is the date of our most recent laws in relation to the industry, 1988. So we have no laws. There is a bill that is still in the parliament. Still in the parliament. They never got it out. And they have a majority. Never got it out. So there is no legislative framework. There is no regulatory body. There is no environmental policy. No environmental infrastructure, no safeguard whatsoever should there be an environmental disaster emanating out of the industry. And this is one of the industries the world over which is prone to environmental hazards. This is one that has environmental disasters visiting it, wherever the operations are. We can distinctly remember the oil spill in the Gulf of Mexico. How many thousands of life forms were destroyed. Thousands, if not millions, were destroyed. We have no environmental plan, no environmental impact, no environmental policy. We don't have an environmental body that is equipped to deal with this industry. So we dealt with regulatory body, we dealt with the law, we dealt with environmental policy. We don't have a population trained, and we have nothing. You're not even hearing an utterance from the university that they are starting up some courses that will prepare Guyanese both in the near term and in the long term to get job in the industry or to be equipped with the necessary skills, learning, skill set, education, technical know-how in this area. It is the University of Guyana is like if it's proceeding as normal. I have not heard a single policy pronouncement coming either from the Ministry of Education or from the Ministry or from the University of Guyana saying that, you know what, we are going to hold some summer courses, we are going to hold some evening courses, we are going to do some distance learning, we are preparing a degree, we are preparing a diploma program. Nothing. So educationally, technically, academically, there is no preparation whatsoever. Then we don't have any local content protection. Nothing. We're not even borrowing a draft program from Trinidad. Trinidad has very strong local content legislation, programs, network that we can borrow, we can cut and paste, even if it is only temporary until we develop one for our own, one of our own. We don't have anything at all. So foreigners are here and they are buying out properties left, right and center, preparing themselves to benefit from the oil industry with the encouragement of the government and no protection for local people. None. 2 or 3 nights ago, I was told that there was not a hotel room available in Guyana. Not a single hotel room available this weekend gone. Not one in Guyana. So many foreigners are here. And what you think they are here for? You think they are here because they like our rainforest? You think they are here to look at the glory of the green heart tree? Or the majesty of the Kaichur Falls? No. Those things were always there. But the foreigners were not here. And I don't blame them. I don't blame them. They are a people who are looking for investments opportunities. They are looking to make a dollar. They are looking to enrich themselves. They are not doing anything wrong. They are simply taking advantage of the environment, the existing status affair created by the incompetence of this government. The people are not doing wrong. Riverside land is for sale. They are buying. And they are buying at a high price. The government selling land to them. They are buying. They are not doing anything wrong. And when these properties are sold out, the Guyanese will become second-class citizens because they will have to end up working for these foreigners and working for the oil companies, not doing the big paying jobs, because these people are not going to employ us because they like us. We will be doing the menial tasks, the menial jobs, while the real big paying jobs, the foreigners will bring in their own people. Because what ExxonMobil is doing, and all the oil companies, rather than bring the operations from Africa, rather bring their operations from the Middle East, or from Alaska where they are operating, They're bringing them right from Trinidad because it's very close. So they are simply moving the infrastructure from Trinidad. They back up the logistics companies from right here from Trinidad, 55 minutes away. Much cheaper for them. But the Trinidadians, they had local content in their time, and they were able to build up that kind of capacity in their country because they had a government that understood and understand. But we have a government that is not only incompetent, but in my view are incapable. They are incapable of understanding their incompetence, so they will not seek help. They're not going to seek advice. They're not doing that. So the ministers are going at the Marriott and they're sipping Moet and champagne with the investors, and that is it. They go on back home and sleep. They have a jolly time. And the Guyanese and Guyana are being exploited, and Guyana is being bled. And that is what is happening. And that is where we are. Do you know we had a major conference at the Marriott where people had to pay 2,000 US to enter the conference. People from all over the world, some of the largest businesses in the exploratory and the oil sector were here at the Marriott. Hundreds of people, that's why all the hotels were sold out. There was no public announcement. This thing was not popular, was not publicized in the manner that it should. The restaurants in Guyana, in Georgetown, did not have food for the people at the conference. I don't want to call the restaurant names, but they were restaurants that people went to for dinner. And the meat, mutton ran out, chicken ran out. Why? Because the government did not inform the population, did not prepare the country for the conference. Did you see how we prepared Guyana for Cricket World Cup? Do you recall the national preparation that we had for Cricket World Cup and Carifesta? Now that event may not be as big as that, but a competent government should have been able to assess the number of people that are going to flow into Georgetown and ensure that the businesses, the entertainment places, the restaurants, the hotels were sufficiently informed. Most of you who are listening to me in Guyana don't know that there was such a massive confabulation at the Marriott over the past week. You don't know. And that is because the government didn't bring the level of awareness. That is the role of a government. That is the role of a government. We have no capacity, there is no talk anywhere of us building a storing capacity for oil that we are going to receive as part of our payment. So we, as a must, as a necessity, will have to sell the oil to the companies producing. Our government not even addressing their mind to building a capacity here to store some of the oil. So we have to accept the price that the oil company are going to offer us because we have no other choice. Our government is not giving us another opportunity, another alternative, another chance. another option. We have to take the price that the people are offering. So I thought that I would draw to your attention the lack of preparedness which exists in this country in relation to what the world is calling the advent of the next Dubai. That's how they're describing what will happen in Guyana over the next few decades. They're calling Guyana the new Dubai. And we don't even have a single piece of policy yet in place to prepare us for this new Dubai. That is unparalleled incompetence we are witnessing and we are living. You could, and the oil hasn't come here yet, but their focus is on the oil. Every speech every minister makes is about what will happen when the oil comes, how it will transform us. Of course, they already started to share out the money. They have handouts and so on that they are promising. And that is where the focus is. As a result, we can already foresee what will happen to the other productive sectors in the country. Because the neglect started even as soon as they came into government. The neglect of the other productive sectors. As a result, every productive sector is faltering and faltering badly. Every single one of them. And it not only has to do with over-focus on the oil, because they're not even focusing on the oil. Because I've given you hardcore evidence and empirical data, or lack of it, to show you that they're not doing anything about the oil. Neither are they doing anything about the other sectors. So, they have killed sugar, as you are aware. They have put 20,000 workers on the bread line. And as I normally would say, each of those workers have a family of about 4. So that's 80,000 people. Then the sugar industry, the sugar worker, in the villages, they sustain the villages, they sustain the communities in which they live. So the market that is next to the pay office is dying because that market is sustained by the pay packet of the cane cutter. You know, next to every pay office there is a market. Think about it. Whether it's Keldon, whether it's Lusignan, whether it's Enmore, there is a market next to the pay office. That market is dying a death. So you have 50, 60, 100, 200 vendors per community that are out without income. And it goes on like that. The shops in the villages, the rum shops, the bars, they all depend. And remember, the cane cutter, all his money is spent. It goes back into the economy. 1/3 of it goes as taxes. Then he pays NIS. Then everything that he buys, he pays VAT on. Sugar workers don't save. Hardly. They don't have enough to save. So they spend back. So all of that money is gone out of the economy. Though sugar may have been running at a loss, it still contributed a significant portion towards our national economy. And forget the fact that it used to provide all the jobs and all the other benefits that I can speak about, for much more. So sugar is dead. Look at what has happened to rice. They made big promises how much $900 per bag. They will find new markets. Not a single new market has been found. And the rice sector has been declining. A rice conference was held, as they promised in their manifesto, at the convention center when they first got into government. And the president said very clearly that the government is not planting rice, the government is not doing rice, and the government doesn't have to help anybody doing rice. That is the government's position on rice. And of course, you know the whole story about seizing rice lands, taking away the rice lands from the rice farmers, increasing the rates and the rents and the drainage charges to exorbitant levels that the farmers can't find it sustainable now to operate. They're not draining the lands anymore. So that's the story of rice. Forestry. Bai Shanlin is gone. Barama is gone. There is no major player. There is no market for the wood. We don't have a kiln drying facility in this country. None. Look at mining. Look at mining. Look at what they have done to mining. Even the larger companies can't survive anymore. So Troy Resources sent home 400 guineas. So these guys are not creating a single job. Barama said in a public statement that they cannot function here because of the government's policy and the style of government. Troy Resources sent home 400. So they're not creating one job, but they're killing 400 at a time. The fishing industry, they sent home a few hundreds. Bauxite barely surviving. And commerce and trade. The private sector will tell you, they have done all the surveys. The decline in trade and commerce, the private sector measures it at about 40%. 40%. And I don't have to tell you about taxation. The regime of taxation, over 200 new taxes and licensing fees that they have imposed across the board. Imagine what will happen when the oil comes and there is another source of income. What will happen to the rest of the productive sectors? We don't have the oil, they have completely destroyed the other productive sectors through neglect, through adverse policies, through complete non-assistance, through vicious taxations, through neglect of the public sector and public infrastructure. You could imagine what will happen if they start to get money from oil. What will happen to the productive sectors then? And I have always said that our strength, the strength of our economy, is not and will never be oil. It will remain the agro sector. And what we have to do is to ensure that we use the oil resources intelligently. Use it to enhance the productive capabilities of the other sectors, because oil is not exhaustive. It is exhaustive. So it's going to be here for a period. That's the problem that Trinidad has made. The oil is finished and there is nothing left in Trinidad. That's the reality that Trinidad is coping with now. And we are going to end up worse because they still have some other. If we don't develop use the opportunity to build our infrastructure, educate our people, build a first-class university with the money. I don't believe in sharing out no money. I believe in putting medical insurance for every Guyanese. I believe in a scholarship fund that would ensure that every person who wants to go to a university can go to a university and the state pays for it. I believe in cheap electricity, cheap power, sustainable power, renewable power, so that the factories can be built, so that we can have food processing done. We can move from primary production to value-added production. Build our other sectors, our IT sectors. Invest in our people. Don't make them dependents. Make them independents. Educate them. There is no greater power that you can give a man than a good education. And that is what the oil money should be used for. And develop the other sectors in the country. But before the oil comes, they are killing every other sector. So it is not difficult to foresee what will happen if this style of government continues. And don't be fooled with what you're seeing going on now. Because what is going on now is a plundering of the treasury to win votes. There is no sincerity. There is no reason why. Nothing has changed economically for this big increase to have been given by the finance ministry. There is no production anywhere that caused an increase in earning capacity in the country for this huge increase in salaries and wages to have been paid. It is simply an electoral gimmick. In fact, the economy has gotten worse, but yet they have found money to pay. They could have done this 3 years ago, but they pay themselves only. They pay themselves only. So don't be too impressed with their going around now. They are emptying the treasury because they are banking on the influx of the oil money next year, early next year. So they don't mind. They are emptying out the treasury. Unauthorized expenditures. Of course, there is no cabinet. All these things we will have to deal with. So schools are being promised at Yarrow Cabra. Schools are being promised at the Essequibo Coast. There will not be any shortage of promises. Every day they're going to be in the communities. Why were they not in the communities last year or the year before? You will see them every day sharing out goodies, especially in the hinterland areas where the people are uneducated and the poverty is high. So what they will do is to exploit the economic conditions and social conditions of those people and overwhelm them with gifts. Nothing lasts long lasting but gifts. So there is no policy. There is no developmental plan. Well, it's too late now. There has not been one for 4 years. But they will come out in a manifesto again, and it will be a litany of promises. 100-day promise, 1,000-day promise, 2-year promise, 3-year promise, long-term goals, short-term goals. You will hear all of this. They did it. They did it. I don't think in their 1 year promise, I don't think they delivered 10%. In the 1 year promise that they had a 100-day promise, sorry. I don't think they delivered 10% of that, of the 100-day promise. One of them was constitutional reform. They said within 100 days, they're going to reform the Constitution. 4 years after, not one constitutional change. Not one. Not one. There's not even a draft. There is not even a draft of a constitutional amendment anywhere to be found. Not even a draft of one article in the Constitution. And they promise constitutional reform. Well, let us assume that they promise that it will commence in 100 days. I don't think they're realistic. They're so foolish they promise anything. But reasonably, let us say they started, they promise that they will start it in 100 days. Well, 4 years after, there is not even a proposal on the table. There is not a single outreach meeting held in respect of constitutional reform. Not one. And every corner they went in this country, to the United States, to Canada, to all over, and promised big constitutional reform. Massive constitutional reform. Not a single constitutional amendment has even been put forward. In fact, comparatively, this period of 2015 to 2019, we must have had the most inactive parliament. And now I'm speaking before the no confidence motion. The most inactive parliament that we have had in 20 years. From 2006 to 2011, we passed over 100 pieces of legislation. Over 100 pieces of legislation. I don't think we passed 10. I don't think we passed 10. Forget budgetary legislation. I don't count that. I don't think we passed 10 major laws in 4 years. We passed 2 or 3 AML CFT bills, and we passed about 2 or 3 other acts. That is what we have done over the past 4 years. Not one to do with the oil sector. The government, this government, has not once invited the major opposition to sit at a table to discuss the oil industry. Not once. Let me repeat that for your assimilation. The style of government that is being practiced has not allowed one meeting, not once, did the president say to the leader of the opposition, you know what? This oil resources here belongs to all of us. You are representing a large part of the population, and so am I. And we need the best hands on deck, or we need the best heads to advise us forward. Let us have a discussion. Let me hear your views on how you think we should proceed with this sector. Not one meeting. I don't think, quite frankly, that the president ever discussed it with his own cabinet. I don't think that this government ever sat down a day and had a serious discussion about the oil industry either. I think they go through the motion. Because you're not seeing evidence of it. If there were some intensive meeting, some elaborate meeting, something would have been published in the press that, you know what, the government met and they have formulated this new policy, or they have established this commission, or they have established this task force. Nothing. So one has to assume that there has not been, even at the level of the government, any serious engagement. And let us look at the government and the population. This is a new industry. New, completely new to Guyana, brand new. The government has not once led a delegation across this country to invite your views, the people. The oil, first of all, is not owned by the government. It is owned by you, the people. You and I. Have you ever been consulted by this government? Has this government, have you read anywhere in the newspaper or heard on TV that the government as a team, as the government of the day, has gone to the people and solicit their views on what they would like, how they would like this industry to move forward? No consultation whatsoever. None. Not in Georgetown, not even in their own support bases, not even in their own communities, not among their own constituents. Have they once consulted? So they determine what use they will make, how they will spend the money. No protection for the people, not even a word of consultation with them. That's the kind of arrogance that we are seeing every day in the government in relation to the oil sector. Right now, as you know, we really don't have a minister of oil. Well, you have no ministers, but the president has taken the portfolio himself, and the president doesn't speak to anybody. The president, as the reporters will tell you, have not had more than 3 or 4 press conferences in 4 years. That must by itself be a world record. So this minister of oil has not even briefed the press. Well, he has not briefed them about anything. Not briefed them about anything. More so about oil. So that is the state, the numbing state of Guyana. And that is the style of government that we are burdened with or burdened by as we move into oil production over the next few weeks. Because that is what the newspapers reported, the oil companies saying, one of them likely to start in December. And this is the kind of environment that it is starting in. No preparation whatsoever. And I've gone through the whole gamut of areas where there have been no preparation whatsoever. In terms of the elections, we continue to fight the challenges that are presenting themselves every day. You would have read in the newspapers and saw on the news that right across the country, in particular Region 5, the PNC, APNU, have made thousands of objections to persons on the list, the PLE, during the claims and objections period. Thousands of objections have been made, and our members and our activists and our leaders have had to go and fight them off. So we had a few thousand, nearly 10,000 were made in Region 5 alone by Carol Joseph, the PNC or APNU activist. Over 10,000. We got all dismissed. Now they have filed 10,000 appeals. So Friday, I have to attend a hearing somewhere in Region 5 to address 10,000 objections, 10,000 appeals, or more. I don't know the number. So I give you that information for you to understand the politics of these people. So you have filed 10,000 objections and you lost all. It means, and you know who hear these objections? Returning office employees of GCOM. They hear these and they dismiss all. And now these people are appealing. So they want, and who you think they are objecting to? People whom they consider or suspect would be voting for the PPP. And Guyanese. So we, the PPP, have been engaged in this constant battle, either at the level of GCOM, on the streets, or in the courts, to protect the franchise and the rights of the Guyanese people to vote. That is what we have been doing every single day. So Friday, they lost 10,000 or how many thousand they have filed objections to. Now they have appealed. We have to go there now and defend that again. And where are the other parties? What are they doing? Where is Mr. Shuman? Where is Mr. Ramkaran and Anog? Where is Mr. Badal and Mr. Hines? These are Facebook politicians. These are television politicians. These are politicians that are making glamorous appearances. What are they doing for the Guyanese people? It's only the PPP. Only the PPP that is out there in the fields, in the courts, on the streets, in the villages, at the GCOM centers, at every area of battle. Only the PPP. Where are these politicians? And then they would accuse the PPP of doing nothing. And the two major parties, they love to say that. The PPP and the PNC always fighting. Why do you think the PPP and the PNC always fighting? Because the PNC always want to take away the rights and freedoms of the people, and the PPP have been protecting and defending those people. That is the story of politics in Guyana, and that is what we will continue to do. And that is what we will continue to do. And the time has come for them to join. They must prove their worth. We don't need armchair politicians and armchair generals. We need them to be on the ground. We need them to defend the rights and freedoms of the people of this country, because those rights and freedoms are constantly being assaulted, and attempts are being made to take away those rights and freedoms from the Guyanese people by the APNU, AFC. And the PPP have been there soldiering on night and day, and we will continue to do so. But here's where my operator is signaling to me that I have to wrap up. I want to thank you very much for joining me over the past hour or so in this course. I've covered a number of issues, and I hope that I have informed you about the situation taking place in our country. And until next week, until we meet again, please take care and be good to yourself. Good evening and goodbye. Thank you.